Putin's regime rests on three pillars: propaganda, the FSB, and Kadyrov. These three Kremlin mackerels complement each other and at the same time oppose one another, so that none of them can gain enough power to overthrow Putin. The behind-the-scenes war between the security service guys and the Akhmat tea drinkers is in fact the key to Putin's success. In order to seize power and become a dictator, the Pale Führer elevated the security services and granted them virtually unlimited authority. Naturally, this created the risk that the descendants of the NKVD officers would want to get rid of Carlito and move into the palace in Gelendzhik themselves.
The Tsar in the palace, Tsar Palace.
To prevent a revolt by the Blue Caps, Putin created Kadyrov, the well-known organized crime group Don Don. With the Tsar's generous permission, Akhmat runs rampant across the country, keeping the security forces in a constant state of tension. It's hard to think about a coup d'etat when Chechen gangsters are constantly trying to take your business away from you.
The Chechen authorities have long been closely intertwined with organized crime. For example, in 2006, two Chechen clans couldn't agree on the division of land belonging to the St. Petersburg meat processing plant. The story ended in bloodshed. Special forces from the Vostok Battalion burst into the St. Petersburg office of one of the parties involved and trashed the place. The police preferred not to get involved in this matter.
Another example of confrontation is the battle for the largest kiosk in Russia, Wildberries. Ramzan tried to wrest this multi-billion business away from the presidential administration. In true 90s fashion, he carried out an armed hostile takeover of an office in central Moscow and killed people.
This is Romanov Dvor, just 900 meters from the Kremlin. The Moscow Business Center became the scene of a serious showdown that erupted amid a high-profile divorce case within the Russian business elite. Vladislav Bakalchuk, the husband of Tatiana Bakalchuk, the founder of the giant online platform Wildberries, came to the company's office, accompanied by his business associates Sergei Anufriev and Vladimir Bakin, as well as some tough guys including karateka Abubakar Mustoyev and MMA fighters Umar Chichayev and Rashid Kolzoyev.
Kadyrov has become so emboldened by his impunity and power that he even went against the interests of Signor Pomidoro himself.
If you are truly men, then please don't do this. But I'm not asking this of you, but get in touch with me or with Adam. Aren't you ashamed? Being men, this is a raid, but I know you have never been a businessman. You have always engaged in raiding, and I will bring this to the attention of the state leadership.
In the end, Kadyrov was slapped on the wrist and asked not to stick his red beard into other people's business. A criminal case was opened against Vladislav Bakalchuk, whom Kadyrov had stood up for. In other words, the security forces made it clear that Ramzan is no longer an authority. If before, people paid Kadyrov for so-called protection and were confident that everything would be fine, now it's obviously not working anymore. So it's better to go and pay respects to some FSB general. The entire Kadyrov business model is collapsing.
Whenever you are asked where the money comes from, you simply say, from Allah.
Of course it's not from Allah.
The problem is that by the time they tried to seize Wildberries, Kadyrov's authority and that of his Akhmat Brigadahad dropped lower than Kadyrov's own IQ. Fans of red loafers and shooting from a G-Wagon on the move no longer inspired panic in those around them. On the contrary, they increasingly provoked ironic smiles. The reason for this is the war in Ukraine and the Ukrainian Defense Forces. The whole world and Russians, first and foremost, saw that Kadyrov's so-called super-elite special forces and his personal guard, who kept all of Russia in fear, are nothing more than a bunch of costumed racketeers who are only good at making TikToks and fighting birch trees.
The Kadyrovites, fighting as part of the occupying Russian army and notorious as the TikTok troops, have once again become the subject of ridicule in Ukraine. In footage shared on social media, you can see Kadyrovites simulating combat, firing at bushes, but there is no return fire from there. We present to you footage of a shootout between Kadyrovites and bushes.
The image of fierce warriors that had been built up for years collapsed near Kyiv in the very first days of the invasion. For a long time after, Akhmat shawarma was being collected along the roads and at the edges of forests. After that, the Kadyrovites never again ventured to the front lines. The valiant fighters of Don Don moved to the third line of defense and to the rear, where they engaged in looting and robbery. The Kadyrovites were also given the honorable task of serving in blocking detachments and terrorizing their own troops. Well, their own troops, so to speak. Russian serfs.
Your people, I'm talking about your subordinate Chechen repeatedly being seen using violence against servicemen of the DNR. Naturally, your elite, our Chechen brothers, would respect it. But there have been repeated incidents of sexual violence committed by them against our fighters.
Every adventure of the Kadyrovites in the war turned into a meme or a joke. One time they heroically storm an empty house, another time they capture a village that was already taken a month ago, or they bravely hold a border 20 kilometers away from the actual border. The commander of Akhmat, Apti Alaudinov, better known as Lapti Aladin, became the main clown of the special military operation, even outshining the tin soldier Konashenkov.
I want to say, wherever Akhmat is, he stands firm. The enemy does not get through.
Every phrase uttered by Alaudinov has become part of the golden collection of Crooked Mirror. During the Ukrainian armed forces incursion into the Kursk region, Lapti became the main spokesperson and newsmaker for the occupiers. Everyone remembers how he never actually met the Ukrainian troops, because he kept missing them, and not just once or twice.
What's most interesting is that on the very night when the enemy had already entered in columns, I drove into the area near Pogrebki, and it turns out I was circling around for an hour and a half, maybe even two, with these columns and the enemy. Basically, we were circling around each other in the same area.
In the same little spot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like God loves me.
You just miss each other in your life.
While running from the Ukrainian armed forces, giving interviews from the bushes, and suggested Russians stock up on popcorn and believe in Akhmat power.
Grab some delicious popcorn and calmly settle in to watch as our skilled guys systematically destroy the enemy forces.
Oh, what an idiot!
Everything Aladinov said was at odds with reality. He lied, and lied. And the Kadyrovites kept retreating, and retreating. And of course, they looted, and looted. It got to the point where, in order to whitewash his own Kadyrovites, Alaudinov started to fully expose the crimes of the regular Russian army.
I immediately went to the head of the Kursk region police department and asked him a pointed question: what problems do you have with Akhmat? As soon as I walked in, he smiled and said, 187 crimes have been committed by the military on our territory. These are murders, rapes, and other crimes. Not a single one of these crimes was committed by fighters from the Akhmat unit.
At some point, Lapti disappeared. Apparently, he was removed from the frame and asked not to open his mouth anymore. Maybe it was done by the FSB, or maybe by Kadyrov himself, because Dondon's authority was burning out like a Russian BMP hit by an FPV drone. During the full-scale invasion, the Kadyrovites have become firmly associated with cowardice and weakness. Z-bloggers, officers, and even ordinary orcs openly talk about how Akhmat fighters hide behind their backs, steal volunteer aid, and are afraid to engage in real combat.
The most important thing we were expecting was the equipment, which our whole team was collecting for, and my parents were raising money for it as well. And yesterday it was supposed to be delivered to us. And you know where it is now? It's been installed on a Tiger vehicle belonging to the Akhmat unit, and we were left with nothing. Before heading out, we basically left with nothing, without any equipment.
In an attempt to salvage their own reputation, the Kadyrovites actively started forcing people to apologize. Public apologies are actually Ramzan's trademark. Anyone who doubted the bravery and strength of Akhmat was grabbed by the nose and forced to verbally praise the Kadyrovite heroes.
At the border, in our Belgorod region, right on the border with the Kharkiv region, there are conscripts standing off to the side, right at the border. That's the reality. The TikTokers are standing behind them, while the conscripts are up front. I won't beat around the bush, I meant the Akhmat unit. Today I had the opportunity to speak with the commander of the Akhmat unit, Apti Alaudinov, where I was clearly shown how everything is organized. I won't go into the details of how. For that, I offer my apologies to you and to the Akhmat unit.
Akhmat even managed to intimidate hardcore Nazis like Milchakov.
I'm a Nazi! I'm a Nazi!
There was a time when people were still genuinely afraid of the Kadyrovites out of habit, because they knew that Putin would always back them up, and you couldn't go against them. They're a mafia with protection from the Kremlin. It's better to apologize and not play Russian roulette.
Let no one think anyone here was scared or forced to submit. That hasn't happened and never will.
Of course. Of course. Of course.
Despite the catastrophic and humiliating failures at the front lines, Kadyrov still remained an authoritative Russian figure. Well, a Russian figure parasitizing on Russian money, but not truly obeying Russian laws. Kadyrov appeared so remarkably independent that many saw him as a real and potential successor to Prigozhin. They said the Hookah Sultan had both the significant power and the undeniable authority to launch a second march on Moscow. For such ideas, one citizen was even arrested in the Khabarovsk region. He called on Kadyrov to seize Moscow while the Russian army was fighting in Ukraine.
Well, for a more complete understanding.
But such sentiments quickly dissipated. The bold Shrek's march on Moscow fully revealed the potential of Kadyrov's super soldiers. Everyone remembers how they were sent to stop the mutineers, but never made it there. As usual, they missed the enemy. They were simply defending Putin in the place where the treacherous Prigozhin never actually passed through. For Putin, this was the first loud wake-up call that Kadyrov is not such a reliable defender and pillar of the regime.
My feeling is one of complete helplessness.
But again, as a counterbalance to the security forces, he was still kept in a privileged position. The Sultan got so brazen that he actually staged a grand circus with his truly unhinged son. In recent years, Ramzan's physical body has been failing quite significantly, much like the aging engine of an old Moskvich. So he openly started pushing his unhinged, underage son into power as his designated successor. A golden shower of medals and orders rained down on Adam Kadyrov. And most of all, he was awarded for humiliating a Russian guy. At 17, Kadyrov Jr. was appointed Curator of Republic's Ministry of Internal Affairs and Chief Special Forces Officer. He was awarded his exploits in the special military operation. These kinds of stunts made the Z Patriots and security forces blow a gasket and set their pants on fire. People began to openly and brazenly mock and ridicule the Don Don family. Putin couldn't help but notice that his once fearsome attack dog and personal infantryman no longer inspired primal fear. As a result, there is speculation that the Führer refused Kadyrov's request to make his medal stand in the successor and next ruler of Chechnya. In other words, with Ramzan's death, the Kadyrov clan is finished.
The comedy is just finally over.
The situation was made even worse by that same clown in a beret, Apti Alaudinov. Alaudinov's foot soldiers pounced on the ROC priest, who was preaching about the Islamic threat in Russia and shouting that soon Muslims would start gutting the loyal Bast-Shud masses.
People are filming from balconies near the metro on Prospect Mira and further out along Yaroslavskoye Highway. You can't see the end. The entire area is covered with people. And these people are men. Healthy, sober, and physically fit men, all of whom diligently practice wrestling and regularly go to the gym for rigorous training sessions. This is a whole army. And if one day the mullah orders them to slaughter the Muscovites, believe me, they will do it very quickly.
Alaudinov called the priest a lunatic and threatened to separate his head from his cassock.
Some idiot who put on a cassock. Honestly, I can't call him anything but an idiot. He's a representative of the army of the Antichrist. There's truly no other way to put it. But I have a very important question. Does someone really have to go and break the law, do something just so that idiots like this don't say such things? And if anyone raises the head of nationalism, that head absolutely needs to be cut off.
The Russian Orthodox Church, as usual, got scared and fired the priest. And it seemed like the Kadyrovites had won. But then the imperialists, chauvinists, and other woolly elements woke up. All of them, fearless and blameless, pounced on Akhmat, calling on Putin for justice. What should you do, Plinya, in such a situation? Support the dying Kadyrov, or back the pocket fascists who are already deeply disappointed in the Führer because of the failed war.
This black plague has come to us to excuse my language, screw all of Russia, our women to kill children, to kill the men who are left. Our guys are fighting. Every day we lose about a whole regiment, most likely. Because just recently my friend called and said, in 4 days our regiment was wiped out. Damn it, this isn't about not liking some spruce-headed Coco. This is about real life, when a person gets torn apart like...
Everything points to the fact that Putin is going to dump Dundon along with his whole gang. And the recent incident in Moscow is proof of that. The Kadyrovites, in their usual style, kidnapped a man right on the street who had said something unflattering about them. They grabbed him and, as usual, took him away to torture him, but this time the security forces responded. The kidnappers were caught and arrested, and the captive was released.
In the evening, on the Moscow ring road, the police stopped the car in which Chepikin was being taken away.
The probability, absolute certainty, really was that the person would end up at the very least in Ramzan Kadyrov's residence with his head bowed trying to apologize. But we didn't see any of that because the Kadyrovites don't have that kind of influence, nor do they have such opportunities or authority.
As Alodinov emphatically stated, grab some delicious popcorn and patiently wait for the impending Dondon apocalypse.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.